Welcome everyone to 121 in Flux, and this is a very random movie review for today. I'll explain the context of this in a minute, but today I am going to be talking about Loch Ness from 1996, starring Ted Danson, Ian Holm, Julie Richardson, and a few others. Why am I why am I talking about a random family, light-hearted romantic movie about the possible proof or lack thereof of the Loch Ness monster? Am I feeling oddly patriotic today? No. um, this is something that came from one of the most recent live streams. Over in Mail Fuzz Live, I do live streams, and live streaming on my birthday a few days ago. We ended up watching this movie kind of on a random whim, and a goal was set that I would have to review the movie. The goal was reached, and as a result, I am here today to review 1996 Loch Ness. So here we are. Uh, watching a movie, which, to be fair to them, is largely shot in and around the Loch Ness area. Um, some of it's shot in other parts of Scotland, a couple of things they're in England, but for the most part, they're in the right region. Everything looks authentic enough. I say that having never personally visited Loch Ness, but the buildings look correct in terms of generally what buildings look like in rural parts of the country, stuff like that. But watching this as a Scottish person, it quickly became a game of which actors are actually Scottish and which ones are just doing accents. And some of the main ones are obvious. Unfortunately, none of the main characters that are Scottish, which is pretty much everyone but Ted Danson, none of them are Scottish actors. They're all English actors doing Scottish accents to varying degrees of success. Well, I say degrees of success. Really, Ian Holm, who plays the water bailiff, I'll have to explain that in a bit. He does okay, actually. His accent, he does sound like an old Scottish man a lot of points. The love interest, Laura, played by Julie Richardson, I think she was a bit over the top at times. And that's just with the accent. We'll get to performances later. James Frayne, who you might more recently have seen playing Sarek in some of the new Star Trek shows, he is much younger than this, obviously, but he's doing a Scottish accent, and I thought his was particularly iffy and caricature-esque, shall we say. Um, I do believe the little girl, Laura's daughter, the little ginger, I believe she is Scottish. She sounds like she's actually Scottish. Unfortunately, the performance of this little 8-year-old is not particularly wonderful. Um, but it was hard not to kind of watch out for these sort of details, like listen for these kind of things. It's hard to kind of ignore it in a weird way when you are from the country. So it became a bit of a game of that. But what is the premise beyond just is the Loch Ness monster real or not? Well, Ted Danson plays this teacher professor who's down in his luck. He's got the worst position where he teaches. He's strapped for cash. He owes people money, and his credibility is in the dumpster because for a few years he spent his time trying to research and prove the existence of Bigfoot, and he's basically in the gutter because of that. He is offered this chance to replace someone who died, who was trying to study and prove the existence of the Loch Ness monster. He doesn't want it because he sees it as a bit of a joke against his character, given what he previously tried to do. But he's so strapped for the cash that he accepts the job, and he flies off to Scotland, and is very disgruntled. He's constantly just kind of mocking the situation he's in. He doesn't believe in anything. But it becomes this kind of love story with Laura, who runs the inn, and they form this budding relationship that starts off very, you know, bickery. It's not. I mean, it's not quite Sam and Diane from Cheers, but I mean, definitely a trope of the time as far as love interests go and stuff like this. But let's keep this in mind. That this is definitely a family friendly PG film. It is a movie that is sort of mildly adventurous at points, but for the most part is about the romance and the characters, and mainly it's about Ted Danson's character finding himself again and not being a grouch and maybe being willing to believe in something. And before I watched that, we were talking about it on stream, and I asked, I posed the question: are we going to see a monster? Are we going to see an effect where we see an actual physical monster by the end of the movie? And I'll get to that in spoilers, I suppose. Which I imagine I'll be in spoilers quite quickly. I don't know how much I've got to talk about without spoilers. As far as the quality of the movie, honestly, it's not particularly good. I think the romance is very forced. There's not much chemistry between the two leads. Some of the beats that are meant to play out is kind of the awkward meet cute kind of moments. I think feel a little iffy. It has that trope where the kid actor, the daughter, really wants to set them up. So she says a lot of things that really just like, I'm not necessarily someone who hates when kids have like dialogue that's a bit too grown up for them, mainly because real kids are, if kids were realistic all the time, especially once you're under the age of 10, they'd be very annoying in a movie. So I'm okay with a little bit of stretching of the truth, but the way she kind of like poses questions, or at one point she says to her mother, I see the way you look at him, like, I see it in your, it comes across like, it almost sounds like she's about to say something along the lines of, he turns you on or something like that. And she never does, obviously, but it feels like that's where the conversation is going because of where she's prodding. It's like she's so observant. Now, admittedly, there is kind of a reason for that, perhaps, that's suggested later in the film. Once we get into, dare I say, less than grounded elements, but it has that trope, and it really stuck out. So the romance is not very good, and because the whole movie is essentially built around it, it's kind of, mediocre overall in quality. But I will say though, at the same time, it's fairly inoffensive. It's hard to be kind of mad at it. It's just it kind of exists. It's a kind of a time capsule of the time period. I I imagine like watching this now, especially with other people, and kind of looking for the real Scottish elements as I was, and sort of like basking in the actual investigation of the monster and what they're going to prove or disprove and the evidence they have for and against. Like, I think I probably had more fun watching this now and sort of with a sort of kind of critical eye, kind of like, okay, what have you got for me, silly 90s movie? Than it probably was to watch in the mid 90s when it was just another movie. I think the time period it came out and it feels very of its era. And notably, it's just a few years after Jurassic Park. And I feel like this movie only exists because of Jurassic Park. And obviously, there's not, but they're presenting the Loch Ness Monster as if it's some sort of, amalgamation of a couple of ancient, dinosaurs. And so they're posing the idea of dinosaurs. It feels a little fantastical and adventurous in its tone. And I do mean a little, just a little. But the music is very adventurous and it's very, uh, like it's actually almost a bit too aggressive at points with just how lighthearted and adventurous it is. It doesn't necessarily fit the plot at all times, but it goes into some wacky stuff in the back half where I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say there is more than a grounded side of this. It does very much turn into a movie. Um, so I'll say that, but it's inoffensive. It's hard to be mad at it. It's just that it's very forgettable. I doubt, I had to record this fairly quickly after I watched it because I doubt I'm going to remember that much of it in a week's time or whenever. So yeah, so to get into the nitty gritty here, and spoilers if you happen to care about spoilers for Loch Ness from 1996, which by the way is on Amazon Prime, at least in the US. It's on Amazon Prime, which is where we watched it. Um, so that's before we even talk about the monster, I want to talk about the kid, the daughter, right? Who was her name? Izzy. Her name is Izzy. She So halfway through the movie, so she kind of befriends Ted Danson quite early on, and even though he's very disgruntled and curmudgeony, and very, Sam Malone effectively, right? He's not really doing much different from his normal shtick at this point. And I say that as someone who likes Cheers. I'm not mad at that necessarily, but he's not exactly doing something wildly different. She befriends him, and there's a scene where they're they're playing cards, or and she's guessing like the cards constantly, and her mother Laura just drops out of nowhere that, oh, it's a bit of a like local legend that there's a she's got the sight, she's like a psychic basically. That's not the word she used. I can't remember the exact word she used, but she has an ability. She can see things. She can, comprehend things. And I'm like, wait, are we really implying the little ginger girl is has got superpowers? Is that where we're going with this movie? And it kind of played it in a way where she kept talking about the Kelpie. That's what she calls the Loch Ness monster. She kept talking about the Kelpie, and she at one point, I genuinely thought the movie was going down a path where it was going to suggest that there's no real monster per se, but she actually creates one, and she, because of whatever supernatural like telepathic imagination power she has, like she actually, the reason why people see things occasionally, the reason why there's witnesses to little things happening here or there, is because there's a line of descendants, there's a family tree, as it were. Although it's not a family because our mother doesn't have it, but the idea that it is, it's a gift that's been passed down, and each generation has at least one person around the loch that their imagination creates the monster in some way, and that's why people see the odd long neck or fin or tentacle or whatever thing we're talking about. Um, and I thought, okay, this is crazy. This is downright bizarre. And the whole time you got the movie, you got Ted Danson out in a boat. He's got all this new fancy equipment that's going to like basically do a 3D scan of the whole lake, and they can just definitively say, no, there's nothing here. There's nothing in the water. We have the technology to map it all out. We can see that there's nothing there. And Adrian, who's kind of his helper, he's like saying, no, there's probably hiding. Like he believes in a way that I've never heard of a Scottish person really being that disinvested in the idea that the Loch Ness monster is real. But then again, as pointed out to me when I was watching the stream, Matt, who's on Comments from the Multiverse with me, is very passionate about Bigfoot being real. So I guess there's probably a Scottish version of Matt somewhere who really cares about the Loch Ness monster being real. So I suppose I can't argue with the logic there. But he gets he's like, he doesn't believe, he believes it so much that he gets really upset at Ted Danson when Ted Danson says it's all a bunch of bullshit. But then of course Ted Danson has a moment where he does genuinely believe, right? Where he sees the photo of the guy who died. The guy who died was taking photos of the loch as he died, and he kind of saw something before he like slipped and killed himself, basically. Um, and there's like a fin. There's like a genuine kind of fin, which bizarrely matches. And this is where I was going with the daughter theory. Is that the daughter at one point gives him like a get well soon card because he gets into a fight. I'm not even going to get into why, but uh, she draws the Loch Ness monster, and her drawing, like the fins on her drawing, actually match this photo. So that's where it was like, oh, maybe it's coming from her. Like she's just got some sort of ancient thing, ancient psychic mystical connection to the water. Um, and eventually, he asks her to show him because she says she's seen it. She's seen the monster. So she takes him into like a secret cavern, and sure enough, the movie has some CGI of a long necked dinosaur being coming out of the water, and then a second one because obviously we got a couple here. Yeah, it's not just been one monster all this time for the centuries of the legends. It's been a family who've passed down. I mean, doesn't seem biologically very sound if there's only one family tree, but eh, yeah, like this is what's happening, and so it's all very fantastical, and Ted Danson's wowed, and the music's sweeping, the little girls talking about how great they are, blah blah blah. And then Ted Danson takes a photograph, and because of the camera flash, it freaks them out, and they go running. As he gets a little hurt or gets a little trapped briefly, which makes the mother really pissed off at him. No one, she doesn't actually believe there's anything there. The mother Laura, it's all just touristy stuff and whatnot. Um, but he's got his photo, and they set up a big meeting where he's going to go with his boss, who's played by Harris Yulin, who was on the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He played a Watcher on that show. Um, so they set up this big meeting for the Museum of Natural History or whatever in London, and they're going to reveal this photo. They're going to reveal that there's proof of the Loch Ness monster, and they get a whole crowd. And the movie kind of just lingers around Ted Danson, like being told that this should be kept a secret. Izzy begs him, and there's someone else who begs him, which I'll get to in a minute because there's a whole kettle of fish to get to. But the idea that if he has the heart, he will choose to keep this a secret because it should be kept a secret because science doesn't need to intervene and keep these beings alive because they've been kept alive themselves for a long time. They're fine. And all it's going to do is like disrupt their life and disrupt everything about them, and so you think he's going to reveal everything, but he's actually swapped out the photo for the children drawing of the Loch Ness monster, and runs off and tells Adrian to tell everyone it was a hoax and it was all fake. Which gets his boss into hot water because he arranged all this meeting, and he goes back and he sees Laura and they kiss and it's a happy ending. Now, there's one plot thread that I've left out here is Ian Holmes' character, the water bailiff, the keeper of the water, who's been doing it for apparently 60 years and it was passed down to him from someone else. There is essentially a Loch Ness secret society, an Illuminati, if you will, where Ian Holm is there to police the loch, and at one point actually pays for two boats to sabotage and destroy the equipment that Ted Danson's got. And is very passive aggressive with Ted Danson. And then once Ted Danson has the photo, he comes to him and sort of essentially tries to plead his case. He ends up getting on the train that Ted Danson's on down to London, and pleads with them that nature's kept these beings alive and it's supposed to be a secret and the world shouldn't know, and it's better for them if they don't know, and so on. And the little twist is as well is that the photograph that Ted Danson had, he actually put it in with Ian Holmes' like bag before he said bye to him on the train. So Ian Holmes like finds it on his way home in the bus, and he's like really happy and starts almost crying of happiness that Ted Danson's made the noble choice, the heroic choice, not to reveal the Loch Ness monster because it should be a mystery. After all this time, it comes across as very not menacing, but like because he's the old man Ian Holmes. There's only so much menacing he can have, but he does come across as like being the leader of a mysterious group who might be willing to kill people to keep the Loch Ness monster a secret. Now, there's never anyone actually killed. All they ever do is destroy some equipment. That's all that ever happens. There's a big action scene at one point as well where something tips the boat that Ted Danson's in, and he believes he saw something. He believes he saw. This is after the photograph. Not his photograph that he takes before he sees them properly, but the photograph from the guy who died where he had the one fin. So he's already starting to believe. Then the boat tips, and he really believes because he thinks he saw something in the water. The movie's an hour 40. It's maybe a little too long for what's actually in it, I would perhaps say. But yeah. So just to sum up this, little girl might be psychic. There's a secret society who protect the secret of the Loch Ness monster because it should be maintained as a mystery. And Ted Danson actually proved the Loch Ness monster existed, but then chose not to reveal it because he grew a heart because of Izzy, and he believed in the world again. He believed in the natural beauty of biology and the wonders of the animal kingdom, and he fell in love with Laura, and they kiss at the end, and it fades to credits, and Rod Stewart starts blaring out of the soundtrack. I don't even. Do you know what it feels like a little bit? It feels like it could have been a Disney movie in a lot of ways, like one of those live action Disney movies that no one really cares about that much, but kind of exists, and it plays at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday. And it's something that you can put on that the kids might be vaguely interested in because of the promise of a monster at some point, but ultimately the kids are kind of bored by it. The adults don't really get into anything because the writing's not that engaging. The acting is a little bit erratic in places as well. I mean, Ted Danson just plays Ted Danson, from what you're used to seeing him as, and he's charming enough. But he he has this or sorry, he's natural, but the others have this thing where there's points, and I don't blame the actress. Like, Julie Richardson, who plays Laura, who she was in Event Horizon around the same time, and some other things. She has some moments where her character just starts like yelling, and then there's other moments as well where like a guy who's like attracted to her keeps trying to talk to her, and he starts yelling at various points. There's various points in this, and Adrian as well when he gets upset at Ted Danson. There's points where people just start yelling, and it comes off as very kind of comical, and I think it's because partly because of how it's written. It's written to be a PG, so it's written to not actually get very serious, but they have to act very serious. So there's kind of a disconnect in the performances a little bit, where they're kind of holding back, but also trying to sound very angry. It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird. There's a bit of a disconnect. I will say what one of the the hunt for Loch Ness in the movie was somewhat balanced out by us in the audience, because I in the audience of the stream, the chat, were trying to basically catch a sighting of Ted Danson's bald spot, which we know he wasn't actually that shy about, because he actually revealed it on an episode of Cheers. Like, there was a big thing where he let them like reveal that he was wearing a little bit of a toupee at the back to cover up the bald spot. It was something they did late on in the show, and this is a few years after Cheers finished. And I do, so I do wonder where this decision came from. But it did feel like the movie, through the cinematography, was trying to hide it a lot of the time. Now, it didn't hide it all the time. There was a few scenes where he was spinning around, because of the way that the scene was blocked out or something, where you would see it. I think you saw it the most when he kisses Laura in the kitchen at some point, sort of like 2/3 in. But early on, it felt like the camera was never doing an over the shoulder shot of Ted Danson. It was kind of trying to avoid it at all costs. That's what it felt like. And I don't know if it was the director or someone who said, "Oh no, that's we can't have the bald spot on display. That's unattractive." How dare we actually show the natural aging of someone, of an actor? We have to hide that by all means. Which is someone whose hairline is not exactly full frontal, as it were. It's really funny to me how much they try to hide this, but um, it was it was curious. It was funny. There's a couple of funny little tidbits here or there. The differences in culture. Like at one point, Laura says "touch wood," uh, and Ted Danson says, in America we say "knock on wood." And this is an accurate thing. This is I've heard "touch wood" in my life. That is not just a movie thing here. This is accurate. Um, but it never. What's funny is it never occurred to me until this movie, the way he sort of says it, and the way he looks at her after she says "touch wood," is that it sounds a little bit a kind of innuendo, because wood, especially in the US, wood's used as a euphemism for a boner. So uh, so it became almost this thing where I started giggling because it felt like, oh, we need to keep talking about this touching of wood. How much wood touching is going on here? And he said it again later on in the movie. Because when he first arrives in Scotland, he's very upset. He's constantly complaining about the differences and the size of the cars, and um, how he thinks everything seems to be built for people who are smaller and stuff like that. Which and there is some truth to this. Cars, not just in Scotland, but just typically in Europe, cars don't tend to be as big for whatever reason. Um, there tends to be a lot more like not minis. Like it's not everyone's driving a mini, but cars don't tend to necessarily have the big sort of American body that you tend to see in the US. There's a lot less pickup trucks as well, for example, driving around. Oh, farmers and workmen, builders and things like that. They'll have pickup trucks, but regular people don't typically have trucks. Uh, in the UK, and I assume the same is probably true for mainland Europe. I could be wrong, but I don't think they do. So he's acknowledging these differences, and that's mildly amusing. And I do mean mildly. I mean very mildly. Uh, you know. So But like I say, the movie revolves around the relationship and the bickering and him convincing her to let him stay in a room, even though it's not, it's the off season where she doesn't actually rent out the rooms, and the daughters try to wrangle it and sort of talk her into it and kind of like almost force them into situations where they're going to have a romantic meeting with each other. And that stuff just all kind of falls a bit flat because there's very little chemistry, and the trope of the kid just kind of makes it even worse. So yeah, mediocre, but inoffensive. So there you go. I really have nothing more to add on 1996. The 1996 film Loch Ness. But it's not like there's a lot of Loch Ness monster movies out there. Although, well, there probably is tons, but they're probably all like sci-fi channel like garbage. Um, this actually at least is a real movie. It feels like a real movie. It has real actors in it. It's shot, properly. Not impressively, but it looks like a movie. So there you go. Loch Ness. If you've seen it, if you happen to have seen this for some reason, let me know in the comments what you think of it. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. We get me on the Twitters at @mail_fuzz for channel updates, but otherwise that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.